police and go, excuse me, there's someone terribly frightening in my house. Could you come and arrest them, please? And they go, well, certainly. Do you have police insurance? That's how we see healthcare back home. Because this isn't about, is there an incentive to work? It's an ability to work. Education and healthcare aren't things that make you work harder. They're things that will allow you to work harder. This is why it's also a practical issue. Because this isn't a private problem, healthcare, it's a public problem. Half of all personal bankruptcies in America are due to people trying to pay for their medical bills. And most of those, 3/4 of those people, have health insurance. There are 30 million people, on conservative estimates in this country, without healthcare at all, and a sizable proportion that are underinsured. The problem for the individual is that is someone unable to work in the economy. And I think in times like this, we now all know that a bad economy is not just bad for the person without a job, it's bad for all people because productivity for the whole goes down. But it's also a burden on the companies. General Motors is just a health insurer that happens to make cars on the side. By placing this burden on companies rather than governments, what you do is burden the innovation of your industries. You burden the ability of them to make profit and go forward. And that harms everyone from employment opportunities too, lowering the general standard of living and increasing the likelihood of needing healthcare in the first place.
Andrew.
So, no, it's the end of the speech time. You've got a whole time to go nuts. The difference between these systems isn't what is currently going through, and we'll go through tomorrow, about who funds healthcare, but who has access to healthcare, who gets given the finite resources that we have. What we do is decide on a basis of need. We think that's more moral and more practical than allowing the wealthy to buy it when they choose and the poor to stay in the gutter wishing they could afford it. That's why I prefer the British system.
Ladies and gentlemen, Andrew is lovely. Andrew wants everybody to have healthcare. Andrew hasn't talked about who has to pay for it. Andrew hasn't talked about how the government takes your money and gives it to people who don't deserve healthcare and does it inefficiently. Andrew's a nice person, but we both have to live in the real world, and America is as real as it gets. But he gave some examples. He said police, like obviously, phone up insurance, that's a terrible idea. But like policing, incredibly cheap. Policing rather easy. You need like a couple of policemen per 1,000 citizens in order to police a neighborhood, right? They need a car, they need a gun, they need some sort of judicial system, which you'd have to have anyway, even if you did have police insurance, right? That is not analogous to healthcare. Healthcare is an unlimited burden of money to place on a society. You could spend your entire gross domestic product on healthcare, and all you would get is a lot of really ill 110-year-olds. You can pay for healthcare until you run out of money, and you'll still not have solved the problem. Healthcare is different from policing. Healthcare is a huge burden on society. Andrew talked about personal bankruptcies, but like if Andrew's standing behind the moral of economics is why you should do this, not morals, but economics is why you do this, in your national GDP-based self-interest to provide people with healthcare. I say your system's awesome at that. Your system provides healthcare, excellent healthcare, the best healthcare in the world, to the most economically active individuals in your country. If it's about getting the most bang for your buck, then your system does that by giving Bill Gates incredible healthcare, and people have no money, no healthcare. I'm not sure that's an advantage of your system, but if that's what Andrew's standing behind, your system's wicked at it. No thanks, Andrew. Then he talks about GM and how, it cripples General Motors to have to pay for everyone's healthcare, to be forced to pay for their employees' healthcare. Right? In our system, everybody has to pay. You don't magic this money from somewhere. At the £200 it takes out of my wallet to pay for everybody else's healthcare, right, is $200 or pounds that I can't be spending on consumer goods, that I can't be spending in the real economy. We're both taking huge amounts of funds out of our economic system. I'm taking it from General Motors and, Andrew's taking it from one of us is taking it from General Motors, and the other is taking it from everybody. That's still money coming out of the economy that can't be used to stimulate growth. General Motors isn't going bankrupt because of healthcare. They're going bankrupt because they make rubbish cars that no one wants to buy. So that's what Andrew's talked about. Right. But your system, why is your system good? Like, you don't know what you've got till it's gone. Why is your system good? You have the best hospitals in the world, the best surgeons in the world, the best equipment in the world, the best medical resources in the world. How do I know this? The awesome country to the north of you that runs its own socialized healthcare system. When people get really sick in Canada, when the chips are down and they need the best doctor in the world, what do? They fly south, because that's the way the best doctors are. Now, what Andrew's getting up to say is, is that the best healthcare system in the world? Only if Bill Gates... Okay, what is your question? That's a good question.
The only people coming down from Canada are the rich people queue jumping.
No.
Because they're not based on need.
Andrew, shh, that's not true. When you are really sick in Canada, the Canadian government will buy healthcare time in America for the best heart surgery, the best treatments, right? But the bigger question, the more relevant question is, but is this best healthcare only available to Bill Gates? Now it is, right? But in principle, that best healthcare is available to anyone who works for it, right? If you work hard enough, if you are lucky enough in some sense, if you contribute enough to the American economy, that best healthcare is available for you, right? But if you're just reasonably well off, if you can afford health insurance, there are great hospitals in America. And the reason that those hospitals are better than those in England or best in any other country is that hospitals in America have an incentive to do well, right? There's no incentive in Britain, or limited incentive, to be the best hospital in the country, the cleanest hospital in the country, the best doctor in the country, right? You don't get paid anymore. You're a civil servant taking home the same amount of money at the end of the day. You can't be fired, because that's not how social services work, right? Teachers don't get sacked for being rubbish in this country or in my country. So once you're employed by the government, it's a job for life. You have no incentive in Britain, or limited incentive, to be the best hospital in the world. It's a structural problem. It's not just about the fact that more money goes into your healthcare system. Now, Andrew could have said that your healthcare system is wasteful because it spends more money than any other healthcare system in the world. But what he's missing is that other healthcare systems, mine and Canada's, are reliant on your healthcare system. Why is that? Because you guys aren't using the extra money you spend on healthcare to buy gold-plated Coke and whores. You're spending that money on medicines, on paying the most in the world for pharmaceutical products, on designing the best CAT scan machines in the world and buying them so people have an incentive to develop those machines. Everybody else in the world, our big, socialized monoliths, freeload on the dollars that American insurance providers spend on American healthcare. You couldn't have the Canadian healthcare system, you couldn't have the British healthcare system if there wasn't a huge incentive for companies to develop excellent medical products in order to fulfill the American consumer. Your system provides great things not only for yourselves, but for everyone else in the world. What other fallacy did Andrew say? He said that healthcare is a finite resource. It's completely inelastic, right? There are only so many doctors, there are only so many drugs. This isn't true, right? It's true right now. There are only so many doctors in America, so many doctors in England. But when you apply incentives to people, they change. So when you pay doctors more than any other country in the world, more people want to become doctors. They decide, I'm not going to be a lawyer, I'm going to be a doctor. I'm not going to be an investment banker, I'm going to be a doctor. The best and the brightest in my country go to work in the City of London because that's where the money is. You reward your surgeons to the extent where it is the top-level job to go to. That's why your system is not best because you spend the most money. It's best because your system of incentives makes the best hospitals, the best doctors, the best CAT scan machines. It's a good idea. Right. How long have I got? Time. Okay. In my next speech, I will talk about some other stuff, but now I'll hand this over to Andrew. Thank you.
Right, I accepted most of the things that Dan said I didn't, even though he pretends I didn't, and he ignored all the important stuff about basing it on need rather than on wealth, because Dan's from Britain and agrees with those things. He thinks the American system is immoral too. So what did he actually say? This is where he started nitpicking about economics. And he had a few things here. Firstly, he thinks that General Motors and himself are entirely analogous. We have to tax someone, we have to make someone pay for healthcare. It's just equivalent. That's not true. You'll have noticed Dan's quite self-important and thinks he is the bee's knees. The government, however, is much cleverer. They notice that he is a self-important student with no ability to pay any money whatsoever, so they don't tax him because he doesn't have any income. What they do is get people who are able to pay, the rich people, take their disposable income and then